Thank you, Berta. Hello, everybody. So the title sounds heavy, but I promise I will try to make it light. It's a personal perspective. I'm an astroparticle physicist, but I'm an experimentalist. So I should add practical aspects here. Maybe it then sounds lighter. And my background actually is illustrated in the image in the background. So we have some processes elsewhere, and in physics, in astroparticle physics in particular, we experience some consequences, which you can see here as this extensive air showers, cosmic radiation. We interpret these consequences, and then there might be some good for everyone, for science, for society. And I think it's the same happens in our everyday life, in our thinking processes, where something happens elsewhere, okay, maybe inside us as well, but then we try to interpret the consequences. And then there are some actions. So there is some deliberation, and then the outcome determines our everything, basically. So the motivation actually is a bit embarrassing for me as a co-organizer of the conference. I'm a bit confused about our title. How many paths to truth do we actually have? So is it like we have two separated paths, like religious thinking, scientific thinking, which do not meet? Okay, the truth is good, at least this. Everybody wants the truth. But I'm pretty sure, from my experience at least, this is what I'm telling, it's only sharing my private things, that there can be only one path. We can call it honest thinking path. So if it is going to be, if we are going to speak about thinking, let us have a very simplified definition just for this talk. I don't pretend any further. So maybe it's just asking and then deliberating process and then some consequences. So just this. And of course, we realize there are different questions, different categories. Maybe this beautiful painting will trigger some associations for you. And now let us ask ourselves, do these thinking elements, let us think of these elements as of questions, do they have some structure? Maybe they are just a set of isolated islands, but maybe they form some logical structure, a tree, where there are inferences from branching point to branching point, where the deliberation in a single branching point determines, for instance, what will be for dinner tonight. And interestingly, especially for me, is that there is a region on this tree, because I'm convinced there is a tree, there is a structure, not a group of points. So in the structure, we have a region which can be actually approached from different directions. So of course, if there is a tree, you might ask about the beginning, the main question, for instance. So, but please note that in science, we can work together actually no matter the approach direction, and that's good. But if we look even closer to that region, if we agree that thinking form a tree, then science cannot be considered an isolated island. It has some context. And this context has an impact. There might be different impacts, but what is important for us, that it might be, there might be practical consequences of this impact. So the science itself might be more efficient, for instance, if we have more money, right? More funding means more opportunities. So there is an impact, maybe there is a positive consequence, and negative consequences as well. And if we zoom in even closer, we realize, maybe it's controversial, for me it's not, but you are welcome to criticize, that even within the science realm, we have non-scientific elements. And this is particularly clear for the very first phase of the scientific process, where we need to make some assumptions, we need to make a choice, for instance, which direction to go, which research to perform. So how do we do this? How we select this direction? Which assumption is good for us, which is bad? So it's an interplay. We have some experience, of course, but basically we use intuition, we use sense of beauty, something like this. So it's entirely non-scientific. Okay, then if we made the choice, that there is a methodology section, more or less reason, but still we need to trust the people who invented the methods, and we need to trust that we applied the correct method to our research. Then the next tricky part is interpretation, how to interpret what we see. A good example is quantum mechanics, a beautiful, very well tested theory which basically helps us everywhere in our everyday life. But it has many interpretations, and the interpretations might differ on a fundamental level. Is the world indeterministic or deterministic? And you don't tell, because it cannot be actually inferred from the available evidence for now. So you need to assume something, and maybe your selection of an interpretation has implication on your further research. So there is an impact inside the science realm, interplay. And maybe we can even risk a thesis that religious thinking can be allowed here. If we allow taste of beauty, so maybe we allow a prayer to the Holy Spirit before making a choice. Maybe if we speak about interpretation, maybe we allow a question like, okay, if the resurrection is the truth, then what could it tell for the overall physics picture? Is there any inference we can make, or it is completely relevant, or we just assume it's supernatural period and we don't think about it anymore? So our religious thinking might trigger some associations, only this, and this might have implications. So if we allow intuition, if we allow other superstitions, for instance, I think many people do this, then why not religious thinking? And then we zoom in even further, a special branching point. It's on purpose a very controversial question which triggers a lot of emotions. And each of you perhaps have own answer. You do a deliberation by weighing the pros and contras. But please let us realize that each pro or contra argument is composed, again, from the mixture of reason and faith. Of course, we would like to have it, this fraction of reason as large as possible, but it will never reach 100% because we do not know everything. So we must, at some point at least, we need to trust someone. Okay, so we might have some private answer after this deliberation, and let us now try to zoom in at a possible single argument. So in this case, it's a real peer-reviewed article. So there was a survey. First, the people were asked who is eligible to answer the question. So the answer was biologists, and then biologists were asked, and more of them, majority, clear majority, felt that life begins on fertilization, but not everybody. So there is something here which tells that not only the experience, scientific knowledge plays a role. So maybe there is a structure then, and maybe in each branching point we have an interplay, science and faith interplay. But faith here is in a very general sense, the widest possible sense. So if this is the case, then the important demand is self-consistent. We want to have this tree self-consistent. Of course, for an intellectual, maybe the strongest insult is that you contradict to yourself. My wife often tells me that. And then I begin to dream about an assistant, a honest thinking assistant, which would be some software which would help me to collect the arguments, to wave, to make service, all the functions you can imagine. And existing tools do not do this. Maybe we can invent a new thing, and this is actually already a project. We have a prototype, it's portable, it's on a PC, on a mobile phone. So it's going on, you can join. And with such a tool, we can dream even more. Maybe we could reduce this polarization, the overwhelming polarization in the society. By new reductionism, we can reduce our quarrels to the gustibus non est disputandum. We just, if we understand each other, all the arguments, all the paths that bring us to the conclusions, to our yes or no, then we might realize, like we often do with my wife, that we agree at the end. Because this is, you like red, I like blue. I respect that you like red, and you respect I like blue. So this is always the case when the faith factor plays a role. And there is always some faith factor. So we might have even a complete reduction. And I hope indeed that if most of us is following just one path to truth, there might be like that. Our world can be better. Less polarization means, well, more time for other interesting activities. Thank you very much.
So thank you. Do we have questions? Maybe I can ask you a question. I need to go close here. Okay. You have explained that, especially in the first phase, the hypothesis generating, we have a mixture of faith and science. Faith not in the typically Catholic sense, but more general. Do you think that there are scientific questions that we should not approach in the first place? Would there be a reason for that, for you personally or for a broader range of scientists?
Of course, we should consider only scientific questions, but the question is, which questions are good for us? So I have some backup, if you allow, if you are interested in more reading. So I've written an article where the context of science is discussed. And if you ask about possible hypothesis, which is actually touching the problem of the context of science, there is a lecture I gave on a recent conference where Father Roszak was co-organizing. So it's a YouTube lecture, so you can go to the YouTube channel of the Polish section of the society, and I would be very happy to have a discussion. So it's a wider topic. It's a wider topic. A general message is that there is some context of science, and why don't we consider the impacts? And this opens the door to asking about the various impacts, actually.
Okay, thank you. And we will have a coffee break next. Thanks again to